Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. In 2014, I finally decided that it would be my last year working on the high seas. It paid very well, but there's a reason for that. It's extremely hard being in the middle of the ocean for 3 months at a time on a non-luxurious 50-foot freezer boat. Living on the ocean is a constant reminder humans aren't meant to be there. From the stench of rotting fish bait mixed with diesel to the constant motion of swells under your feet combined with the vastness of nothing, I always compared it to being an astronaut. It tends to drive you up the wall eventually, no matter how fortified you are. For context, just being able to sit on non-moving furniture back at home was an ethereal experience. The last day of the season tends to be the longest, as we have to pick up every long line that was in rotation and detail the deck of the mess left behind. This would take us very late into the night. On this particular night, we ended our day at around 1:30 a.m. We were 17 hours away from land, so our captain decided to take a nap and allow us 2 hours. This was a gift, yet not standard practice, as he was an alcoholic. We were so far offshore our captain put us on a slow autopilot, which essentially would just keep us from drifting further from land as everyone took power naps. My little ritual every night was to make some tea and smoke cigarettes by myself on the deck. It was the only time I got to myself in such small quarters. This night, however, was both the last night of the season and the most memorable. As I felt a weird bittersweetness knowing that I'd never be this far out in the Pacific Ocean again, I climbed to the top of the cabin where I had secretly stashed a joint in the outdoor freezer. It was sort of my little secret treat at the end of the seasons. I sparked it up and stared out into the moonlit ocean. I went into deep thought for quite some time. As I climbed back down, my jacket got snagged on a fishing hook from a fishing rod stored behind the ladder. And this is when my 19-year-old brain concluded I should do something out here that I would never be able to do again. And that was, well, letting all of the fishing line out on a 200-pound test rod into the near-infinite depth of the ocean just to see what would happen, I guess. I wasn't all that concerned at the time, as I'd seen essentially 99% of the fish that lived out here, but I'd yet to see certain deep-sea oddities such as anglerfish and such. My fascination took hold of me. I proceeded to clamp on a bigger, heavier halibut lure onto the fishing line's carabiner, which wasn't designed for rods, but I felt it was heavy enough to sink further down. I began to let all the line out at the A-beam port of the vessel, standing there for what felt like an eternity. I began to give up on actually letting it all out. At this point, it was a little past 2 a.m. My day's work was starting to become more apparent to me. I started reeling it in quite quickly as I lost interest in this whole idea. I just wanted to sleep at this point. When suddenly, my rod got hooked on an immense dead weight. Extremely dead weight. It wasn't like a fish. I knew what those felt like. I instantly realized that I got snagged onto a kelp patch on my way up. I just wanted to get this done and over with. As I got the kelp patch closer to the boat, I peered over the railing and noticed that the water was absurdly black, even for dimly lit night conditions, almost Vanta black. I talked to my rod, trying to assess where the kelp was, when I saw a saucer-sized silver light flashing in the water. Honestly, I went lightheaded, not knowing what I was looking at. I started hearing something reminiscent of hot tub jets spewing out of water, except much louder. The louder it got, the blacker the water became. At this point, I was just confused until I saw an arm roll up to the side of the boat. As the water cleared from the inky blackness, I saw an 8-foot-long, cigar-shaped creature. It was a squid. Out of everything I've caught in these waters, this was by far the most unexpected. Squid don't tend to make their way up this far north. I remembered hearing about an instance a few years back when they got stuck in an ocean current which pulled them further up than usual. My mind instantly went to, how can I get this thing on the deck? The bragging rights that I would have amongst the crew on our entire trip back would be a poetic end to my career. I began to look for a gaff hook, one arm on the rod, one arm pushing totes around on the deck, frantically looking. I kept a lot of tension on the rod just to ensure that it was still there, but I started to notice my rod was bending very aggressively, nearly pulling the tip to the underside of the boat. The power of this thing felt almost like a hydraulic winch. No gaff hooks in sight, they must have been placed in a storage compartment as we were going to be docked in the next 24 hours. It was standard practice so they wouldn't get stolen in the harbor. I rushed back to the railing, peering over the side. The squid had seemingly vanished out of sight, but the immense tension was still there, and I hadn't let any line out. Until I noticed the unfortunate situation. The squid had latched itself onto the bottom of the boat like a tree trunk. With both of my feet on the railing, I was nearly pulled back onto the deck. I felt a huge release, almost like a giant Velcro strap being pulled apart. I nearly fell on my butt. I lunged towards the railing again, trying to shorten the line even more to inch this thing from out underneath, but my skinny teenager arms buckled almost instantaneously as I could see this thing rolling its whole body and arms back to the bottom of the boat. My anchored foot slipped on a coil of loose rope on the ground, nearly throwing me off the deck. My gut hit the railing. Face to the water, its huge head with its large silver saucer eyes peered out for a moment. They were darting around in a controlled frenzy, almost like it was analyzing me. I stabilized myself and put my feet on better grounding. I began to accept that the risk here might be higher than the reward. Accepting my strength and its immense power, I began to contemplate cutting the line. I noticed the three-pronged hook was attached to the base of its tentacle. In an optimistic attempt, I pulled the rod tightly. The tip started to bounce and flick. The squid began to contort and twist its whole body, pulling its tentacles close to itself, wrapping one tentacle around its hooked arm. Knowing it had compromised its grip on the bottom of the boat, I pulled once again, until suddenly the rod snapped straight. There was a cleanly cut, amputated squid arm on my hook. This thing had performed surgery on itself. The whole length of the squid slowly pulled forward from out under the boat, and I swear, it stared at me for a moment, and with one graceful contraction of its arm and a jet stream of ink, it disappeared into the depths. I stood there for a moment, waiting for my heart rate to hit baseline. I placed the rod on the deck with the squid tentacle still attached and just stared at it. The tentacle slowly coiled itself around the fishing pole. I picked up my teacup off the ground and walked into the galley. I threw the remainder of yesterday's cold coffee into my cup and headed my way to the captain's cabin. No reply. I opened it a crack and said, "I'm ready for my wheel shift." The captain, in a drunken mutter, asked, "Have they rested?" And I replied, "It's time to head back." A few months ago, my girlfriend and I were on the drive back home from a late-night concert at about 1 a.m. We were basically in the middle of nowhere, and I decided to pull off at a random rest stop to use the bathroom. I figured at this time, the only people at this place would be truckers and others in the same situation as me. I got out of my car and walked up to the building, and as soon as I stepped inside, there were a few weird things that I noticed. This place was laid out with 2 men's rooms and 2 women's rooms, and 2 vending machines, one in both corners on either side of the restroom doors. When I walked in, there were 2 people, both standing directly in front of each vending machine, just staring at the vending machines, not reaching to get money or actually intending to buy something. So, I walked past these people and went into the first men's room. The restrooms were laid out in a U shape. A few seconds later, someone else walked in, an older guy, maybe 50 to 60, a working class looking guy. He walked over and started using the urinal right behind me, a few feet away. Nothing about this was very alarming at first, but being the careful person that I am, I already had my pocket knife open in my hand and tucked in my front hoodie pocket. Once I finished up, I went to wash my hands and walked out the door of the first restroom. As I walked out, I realized that I also had to go number 2. To avoid being awkward, I walked into the second men's room, taking note that these weird vending machine people were still in the exact same spot. I went into the first stall and tried to go about my business. Then, I heard someone else walk into the restroom and go into the stall right beside me. Keep in mind, there were about 6 other open stalls away from me. I thought this was really weird, so I looked down and immediately recognized the work boots as the guy from the first bathroom. This guy had just walked in, and I hadn't even been in there for 2 minutes. I immediately got up and left that bathroom. I started speed walking out of the building, and I noticed from outside, looking back inside, that he had also quickly gotten up and was heading towards the outside doors. I just hopped in my car, waking up my girlfriend, and told her I would explain in a minute. I put my car into reverse and whipped out of the spot. As I was shifting into drive, I saw him about 20 feet away, standing next to an old beat-down truck, literally staring me down as I started to drive away. I stared directly back at him and saw him make this really creepy mime-like surprised look at me. I was really tired and confused, but I still don't know what this guy was planning at a rest stop in the middle of nowhere at 1 a.m., or if the vending machine people had anything to do with it at all. This is one of the only times I've ever experienced something like this, and felt actual danger. If anyone has any similar experiences or ideas of what this may have been, I'm all ears. Working as a waitress, people often treat you badly. For every 25% tipper, there are 10 old guys who leer and tip 10%. I usually made it through my shifts okay, but one customer interaction truly creeped me out. It was a slow night, and an older couple got seated in my section. The wife seemed spacey, but nothing too weird. When I came back to their table to get drink orders, she was slowly rearranging the sad little fake flowers that we had for decoration. I joked about it, saying something like, "Oh, messing with my arrangement, huh?" She looked up at me, wide-eyed. "I'm a florist's daughter," she said. She was still moving the flowers around and staring at me after I left with her drink orders. I came back with their drinks, and she had stopped playing florist. I asked what they wanted to order, and while the husband was speaking, she interrupted him repeatedly to order a soup. Same tone each time, with no indication that she even heard him speaking. I asked her if she wanted it served first as an appetizer. She stared at me and repeated the same sentence. The husband cut in and confirmed that they wanted it as an appetizer. I left to put in their orders. Later, I stopped by and asked how the food was. The wife grabbed my sleeve right at the elbow and pulled me toward their table. She complimented the food, but at this point, I was feeling really uncomfortable. Her grip was pretty strong, so I had to repeatedly tug my sleeve to get away. Finally, they were done with their meals, and I asked how everything was while clearing their plates. The wife was very pleased and was still staring at me, wide-eyed and blank. Then she said, "I never got your name." I usually don't tell customers my name unless they ask, so I told her. She stared at me, unblinking, and then asked, "Do you know what it means?" My name is very common, so it was a weird question. I said, "It's biblical or something." She still stared, and then she said, "It means, beloved by God." That was my daughter's name. She was grabbing my sleeve again. "I know she was beloved by God, because he took her back so soon," she continued. She was still staring at me in her weird, wide-eyed way, then she smiled. The husband was quiet, unbothered, and I kind of stuttered and just got out of there. Maybe she was still grieving or on something like a heavy-duty mood stabilizer or something. She had at least 1 glass of wine, but I was really convinced that I was going to drop dead after that conversation. It was just so ominous. I didn't feel physically threatened, sure, but it was the creepiest conversation I've ever had with a stranger. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.